Daniel's hand shook as he held the aged, yellowed envelope, its contents threatening to fracture the very foundation of his family. He never imagined that rummaging through the attic would lead to this devastating revelation. The attic was a mess of memories, with dust-ridden boxes stacked precariously under wooden beams. Daniel found himself surrounded by the whispers of his past, his mother's laughter echoing through forgotten photo albums. He absent-mindedly rifled through the old family belongings, looking for sentimentality amid the cobwebs. It was then that he stumbled upon a small wooden box hidden beneath a pile of old quilts. The box locked his attention with its simple elegance, a stark contrast to the disarray around it. He unclasped the delicate latch, revealing a collection of neatly folded letters, each one tied with a faded red ribbon. With trembling hands, Daniel opened the first envelope, the neat handwriting immediately recognizable. It was a love letter not from his father, but a man named Richard. The words expressed a passion and longing that Daniel had never witnessed between his parents. His heart pounded in his chest as he sat back against the musty attic wall, the realization striking like a physical blow. These letters painted a world where his mother, Helen, was not the loyal wife he had always believed but a woman who had once loved another man deeply. His father, the late patriarch, whose funeral they had attended just weeks prior, was now cast in a different light. Desperation clawed at him as he descended the stairs, each creak a reminder of the burden he now carried. The confrontation with his mother was inevitable. Helen was in the kitchen, her back turned as she diligently stirred a pot of soup, the smell of her homemade recipe permeating the house with familiarity. "Mom," Daniel managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Helen turned, a warm smile on her face that faded as she noticed the letters in his hand. "Where did you find these?" Her voice was steady, but Daniel noticed the slight tremor in her hands. "The attic," he replied. "Who is Richard?" Helen's face fell, a myriad of emotions crossing her features, settling into an expression of quiet resignation. She gestured toward the kitchen table and took a seat, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Richard was someone I knew before your father," she began, her voice a mixture of defiance and regret. "We loved each other fiercely, but life had other plans." Daniel sat in stunned silence as Helen began to recount a story buried beneath years of secrets, revealing a past where love and duty often blurred. It was a tale that made Daniel rethink everything he knew about family. "He was the great love of my life," Helen confessed, her voice faltering. "But your father, he offered stability, a future I couldn't see with Richard back then. I made a choice, Daniel, a sacrifice for the life I thought was right for us all." The weight of her confession hung heavy between them, and Daniel couldn't ignore the hurt it pricked in him. His father, the image of perfection and steadiness, was now marred by a shadow of doubt. Had he known of Helen's past love? Had they both lived a lie all these years? The realization hit him, his father might not have been the hero he always imagined. Daniel felt both liberated and lost, unsure where this truth would lead. Helen reached out, her hand covering his. "I loved your father, Daniel, just not in the way I loved Richard. But I chose him, year after year, out of love for our family." Her words were meant to soothe, but instead, they deepened the chasm forming in Daniel's heart. He needed time to process, to understand the implications of what he had learned. Later, as he retreated to the solitude of his childhood bedroom to ponder his mother's revelations, Daniel knew his journey was just beginning. The past, once thought settled, had stirred into a tempest he couldn't ignore. There was more to uncover, more secrets to unveil, and choices to make that would redefine his family's legacy. Daniel lay back on his childhood bed, the familiar creak of the springs echoing memories of sleepless teenage nights. Now, the room seemed foreign, the walls closing in with every breath. The revelation from his mother had upended everything he thought he knew, leaving him adrift in a sea of emotions that he couldn't yet navigate. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of his parents' lives that had been hidden from him. He considered the possibility that his father might have known about Richard. Did they have an unspoken agreement, a silent pact to keep the past buried for the sake of their family? Or had his father been as oblivious as he had been until now? The following morning, Daniel found himself once more in the kitchen, the air thick with unspoken tension. Helen moved about with a quiet efficiency, the clinking of dishes the only sound between them. He watched her, noting the tired lines around her eyes, the subtle curve of her shoulders that hinted at the weight she bore, a burden now partially shared with him. "Mom," he finally said, breaking the silence, "there's so much I didn't know. I don't understand how you lived with this, day in and day out." Helen paused, her hand hovering over a cup of coffee. She looked at him, a softness in her eyes but also an undeniable strength. "When you've lived as long as I have," she began slowly, "you learn to make peace with the choices you've made. They're not always right, but they're yours." Daniel nodded, absorbing her words. They sat together, the warmth of the morning sun streaming through the window, wrapping them in a fragile moment of understanding. Yet, the questions lingered, unasked and unanswered. What of Richard? What became of him after Helen chose a different path? The curiosity gnawed at Daniel, compelling him to seek answers. He decided to delve deeper, to find out more about this mysterious figure who had once captured his mother's heart. With a vague recollection of the letters, he remembered seeing a return address from some letters, a small town not far from where they lived. It was a long shot, but he felt drawn toward uncovering the truth. Days turned into a blur as Daniel embarked on his search. The town was quaint, its streets lined with old brick buildings and storefronts advertising local wares. It had a charm that belied the pain of its secrets. Daniel felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation as he approached an address he had found in one of the letters. The house was modest, its exterior well-kept, speaking to the meticulous nature of its occupant. As Daniel approached, he rehearsed what he would say, how he might explain his sudden appearance. The doorbell chimed, a soft, melodic note, and shortly afterward, the door opened. Standing before him was an elderly gentleman, his features worn by time yet possessing an undeniable warmth. There was an air of calm dignity about him, a gentleness in his eyes that belied the years etched into his face. "Can I help you?" The man's voice was deep, resonant, carrying with it a lifetime of experiences. "Mr. Richardson?" Daniel ventured. I'm Daniel. Helen's son." Recognition flickered across the man's features, a mixture of surprise and nostalgia. "Helen's son," he repeated softly, as if tasting the words. "Well, this is certainly unexpected. Please, come in." Inside, the house was cozy, filled with books and photographs, mementos of a life well lived. Daniel felt a strange sense of familiarity as he took in his surroundings, pieces of his mother subtly reflected in the decor. "I can't say I was expecting this visit," Richard said, offering Daniel a seat. "How's your mother?" "She's doing well, considering," Daniel replied. "She didn't know I was coming here. I hope it's not too much of an intrusion." Richard waved a hand dismissively, a smile playing on his lips. "Not at all. It's good to meet you, Daniel. Your mother, she was a remarkable woman." The past tense in Richard's words did not go unnoticed by Daniel, and it stirred a sense of urgency within him. "She still is," Daniel corrected gently. Richard nodded, a wistful look in his eyes. "Yes, of course. So, why are you here, if you don't mind my asking?" Daniel hesitated, searching for the right words. "I found some letters in the attic, letters you wrote to my mother. I guess I'm just trying to understand everything." "Ah, the letters," Richard said with a sigh, his expression one of melancholy fondness. "I'm not surprised she kept them. They were a part of a life she might have led." Daniel leaned forward, his curiosity burning. "Why didn't you ever reach out again?" Richard chuckled, a sound tinged with both regret and acceptance. "Life had its plans for both of us, Daniel. Your mother chose a path that I couldn't follow. I respected her choice and moved on with my own life." Daniel absorbed the information, grappling with the myriad emotions it evoked. Richard was a living reminder of the love his mother once had, a love that still lingered in the shadows of their home. "I have to ask, if things had been different, would you have wanted a life with her? Daniel's voice was tentative, laden with the weight of his newfound knowledge. Richard looked at him, a lifetime of memories reflected in his gaze. Yes, he replied simply. But love isn't always enough, Daniel. Sometimes it's about doing what feels right, even when it breaks your heart. The conversation lingered long into the afternoon, Richard sharing stories of his past with Helen, painting a picture of a woman Daniel was only beginning to truly understand. It was a bittersweet revelation, knowing that the life he knew was built on sacrifices and choices made long before his own existence. As he prepared to leave, Richard clasped Daniel's shoulder, his grip firm yet comforting. Take care of your mother, Daniel. She's stronger than you know. The drive back home was somber, the road stretching out before Daniel like a path to the unknown. He needed to talk to Helen, to confront the emotions swirling within him and find a way to reconcile the past with the present. Upon returning, he found Helen in the garden, her hands deep in the soil as she tended to her beloved roses. The sight of her calmed him, grounding him in the reality of their shared life. Mom, he called softly, approaching her. She looked up, wiping her hands on her apron, a smile touching her lips. Daniel, you're back, she said warmly. Where did you go? To see Richard, Daniel replied, watching her reaction carefully. She paused, a multitude of emotions crossing her face, surprise mingled with something like relief. Oh, Daniel, she murmured, her voice filled with understanding. You didn't have to do that. I did, Mom. I needed to understand, and I think I do now. He paused, searching for the right words. I met a different side of you today through him. One I wish I had known sooner. Helen's eyes softened, tears threatening to spill over as she reached for his hand. Daniel, you've always known me, every side of me, she assured. This doesn't change that. I know, he said, his voice steadying. I want us to be able to talk about it. About him, about everything. Helen nodded, her grip tightening on his hand. We will, Daniel. We'll have all the time in the world to understand and forgive. We're family, after all. The weight of their shared understanding settled between them, the darkness of secrets giving way to the light of reconciliation. Though the path ahead was uncertain, Daniel felt a renewed sense of hope. Together, they would face whatever came, bound by the strength of their rediscovered bond. The days that followed their conversation were awash with a sense of fragile peace. Daniel found himself drawn to the garden more often, where Helen seemed to find solace among the blooms. It was here, amidst the vibrant life of roses, lilies, and the occasional stubborn weed, that they began to rebuild their relationship through shared silences and gentle conversations. Helen shared more stories of her past, not all revolving around Richard but about her youth, her dreams, and how those dreams had evolved. Daniel listened, captivated by the richness of her experiences, the layers of her life that he had never fully appreciated before. One evening, Helen confessed to Daniel something that had been weighing heavily on her heart. They were sitting on the porch, the stars visible in the clear summer sky, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. There's something I need to tell you, Daniel. Something about your father, she began, her voice a mix of determination and vulnerability. Daniel turned to her, sensing the gravity of her words. What is it, Mom? Helen took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance, as if drawing strength from the memories. Your father knew about Richard. He found out a few years after we were married, when he stumbled across some letters I hadn't hidden well enough. The revelation was like a sharp intake of breath for Daniel. He knew, he echoed, his mind reeling. And he never said anything? Helen shook her head. No, he never did. It was his nature to avoid confrontation, especially when it came to matters of the heart. He loved us too much to let it ruin what we had. The realization painted his father in a new light, a man who had made his own silent sacrifices for the sake of family. Daniel felt a renewed respect for his father, mixed with an aching sadness for what his parents had endured in silence. Why didn't you ever tell me? Daniel asked, his voice laced with a mixture of hurt and understanding. Helen looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I wanted to protect you from the complexities of our past. You were our joy, Daniel, our chance at redemption. We didn't want our history to cast a shadow over your life. As they sat together, the weight of unspoken truths lingering between them, Daniel felt a profound connection to his father, whose strength had been hidden behind a facade of quiet dignity. In the weeks that followed, Daniel delved deeper into the letters, reading each one with a newfound appreciation and understanding. They were beautifully written, filled with passion and longing, reflections of a love that had once burned brightly. They were also a testament to the complexity of human relationships, where love and duty often collided. Though he had initially feared that these revelations might tear his family apart, Daniel found that they were, in fact, bringing them closer. He and Helen spoke openly, sharing their fears and hopes, constructing a bridge across the chasm that had momentarily threatened to divide them. One afternoon, while sorting through the attic again, Daniel found a photograph tucked inside one of the letters he'd overlooked. It was a picture of Helen and Richard, young and carefree, their arms around each other, joy written plainly across their faces. The image stirred something inside him, a deep yearning to understand the depth of their connection. He placed the photograph carefully back in the box and went to find Helen, eager to discuss it with her. He found her in the garden, as always, tending to her beloved roses. She glanced up as he approached, her face lighting up with a smile. Look what I found, Daniel said, handing her the photograph. Helen took it, her expression softening as she gazed at the image. I remember this day, she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. We were so young, so full of dreams. Daniel watched her, seeing the woman she once was reflected in her eyes. Do you regret it, Mom? Not choosing him? Helen considered his question, a thoughtful silence enveloping them. No, she replied after a moment. I mean, I wonder sometimes what might have been, but I have no regrets. Your father gave me a beautiful life, a family I cherish. I chose the path that felt right, and I would choose it again. Her words brought a sense of closure that Daniel hadn't realized he needed. It wasn't about erasing the past or ignoring the complexities of life. It was about embracing them, understanding that love was multifaceted and that the choices we make, however difficult, define the lives we lead. With a shared understanding, Helen and Daniel began to look forward, planning a visit to Richard. It was an opportunity for Helen to make peace with her past and for Daniel to further bridge the gaps that life had created. The day they drove back to the quaint town where Richard lived, there was a palpable sense of anticipation. Helen was nervous, her hands fidgeting slightly in her lap, but Daniel held her hand, offering reassurance with his silent presence. When they arrived, Richard was waiting on the porch, his face breaking into a warm smile as they pulled up. He welcomed them with open arms, the weight of years falling away as they embraced, the past melding seamlessly with the present. They spent the afternoon in Richard's living room, the air filled with laughter and reminiscence as stories were shared and memories rekindled. Helen and Richard spoke freely, the ghosts of their past no longer casting shadows over their conversation. Daniel watched them, feeling a profound sense of contentment. The journey that had begun with a discovery in the attic was leading them all toward healing. He saw his mother anew, as the strong, resilient woman she had always been, shaped by the loves and losses of her life. As evening descended, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Helen and Richard stood in the garden, their quiet conversation drifting on the evening breeze. Daniel joined them, feeling the warmth of their connection envelop him. They were a study in forgiveness and acceptance, a testament to the enduring power of love in all its forms. Daniel knew that their story wasn't over yet, that there would be more challenges and joys to come, but for now, he was content to savor the moment. The new understanding between Helen and Richard was a gift, one that allowed them to move forward with grace and dignity. As they looked toward the future, their hearts were lighter, their burdens shared, and their bonds unbreakable. Daniel realized that his own journey was just beginning, shaped by the lessons he had learned from those he loved most. He was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that, no matter the choices he faced, he would never be alone. As the evening wore on, the garden became a serene tableau against the dying light, filled with the mingling scents of fresh blooms and the earth's whisper. Daniel, Helen, and Richard found themselves sitting together under the old apple tree, its branches embracing them like a guardian of time. They shared a comfortable silence, the kind that only years of understanding and forgiveness could bring. For Helen, this moment was a full-circle revelation, a reconciliation with the past she had always cherished in secret. She watched as Daniel and Richard struck up an easy rapport, their laughter interweaving in the cool, gentle night air. It was a sound that reminded her of the joy she had once known and the peace she had finally reclaimed. "Richard," Helen began softly, breaking the lull that settled over them, "I want to thank you for today. For being part of our story, even in the way you were." Richard turned to her, his eyes soft and reflective. "I should be the one thanking you, Helen. Knowing you was a gift, and seeing you and Daniel, it's more than I could have hoped for." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply, evoking an emotional warmth that spread through her. She reached out, clasping his hand briefly, as if to seal their shared history with unspoken gratitude. Daniel watched this exchange, feeling something shift inside him, a maturation of understanding about love's vast and complicated landscape. He realized the strength it took for his mother to stand at this crossroads of past and present, to build a bridge from it to a future unshackled by regret. Later that night, as the stars blanketed the sky in a glittering array, Helen and Daniel began their drive home. The journey back was different, the road seemed less daunting now, the path ahead clearer and more illuminated by a newfound understanding. "Mom," Daniel said, breaking the companionable silence. "Are you okay?" Helen smiled, her feelings wrapped in a kind of cathartic exhaustion. "Yes, darling. I feel free. I didn't realize how much I needed this closure until now." He nodded, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. "I'm glad we went. It's good to know where we come from, to understand the journey that brought us here." They drove on, the rhythmic lull of the engine almost meditative as they navigated their way back to the familiar contours of home. When they arrived, the house seemed different, less like a repository of secrets and more like a sanctuary they had cleansed with truth and courage. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel noticed a change in Helen, a lightness that accompanied her every move. She spent more time in the garden, nurturing her roses with an attentive care that mirrored her newfound inner peace. Daniel joined her often, their conversations a blend of the profound and the ordinary, now woven with the threads of honesty and acceptance. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, Helen turned to him with a contemplative expression. "Daniel, you've been my rock through all of this. I'm so proud of the man you've become." He felt a swell of emotion at her words, an affirmation of the bond they had strengthened through adversity. "Thanks, Mom. I think everything that's happened has given me a new perspective on what it means to love and forgive." Helen nodded, her eyes shining with wisdom and affection. "Love is complicated, Daniel. It's not just about passion or dreams, it's about acceptance, sacrifice, and sometimes, letting go." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a letter, its envelope bearing the familiar handwriting of Richard. It felt like a continuation of the dialogue they had begun, a living symbol of the connection still thriving between them. Helen opened it with careful anticipation, reading aloud Richard's warm words of gratitude and hope for their collective futures. His words resonated deeply, touching upon the themes of enduring friendship and the healing power of remembrance. For Daniel, life gradually resumed its rhythm, but with greater depth and appreciation for the tapestry of emotions that defined his family history. The lessons he had learned from Helen and Richard became guiding principles as he navigated his personal and professional life. He found himself more open to the complexities of relationships, more patient with the imperfections that invariably accompanied them. Eventually, another chapter in his life unfolded, a new relationship, tender and promising, that benefited from the insights he had gained. He approached it with the understanding that love, while not always neat or predictable, was a journey worth taking for the richness it added to life. Helen, too, found herself embracing change. She began volunteering at the local community center, sharing her gardening expertise with others and, in doing so, sowing seeds of friendship amid the rows of plant beds. Her newfound community brought her joy and purpose, a testament to her resilience and capacity for growth. As the seasons turned, marking the passage of time, Daniel and Helen often revisited Richard. Their visits became cherished traditions, occasions for laughter, reflection, and the reaffirmation of bonds that time could not erode. Richard's home, once just a backdrop for past memories, became a haven where the future was warmly welcomed. In the years that followed, Daniel often returned to the attic, not as a seeker of hidden truths but as a custodian of cherished memories. The letters remained where he had found them, now artifacts of understanding rather than mystery. He added his own photographs and notes, an homage to the continued story of love and family. The journey that had begun with the discovery of an old letter in the attic had unfolded into a tapestry of human experience, a narrative rich with love's complexities and replete with the resilience of the human spirit. In this story, Daniel found his truth, that the past, with all its trials and revelations, was merely a prelude to the profound beauty of the present and the endless possibilities of the future. And so, with hearts unburdened by secrets and open to life's myriad journeys, Daniel and Helen stepped forward into each new day with hope, fortified by the enduring bonds of family, love, and the healing embrace of time.